Yeah. How you doing this evening? Yeah, you are allowed to speak back. That is totally good. Totally good. I like a bit of audience participation. You could try calling out questions as we go through. That would be fun. That'd be fun. I'd quite like that. Quite like that. Maybe we'll leave that for another night, but that'd be fun. We'll maybe warm up to that. So, if you're new, let me add my welcome to Kristen's. I don't know if you're new, really, because I've only been here for 2 weeks. So, great to have you with us and with me as we begin this new adventure together, a new season for the life of the church. Can we have my little slidey things up? Yeah, thank you. Oh, there we go. Hopefully they're coming in a moment. Great. And I'm beginning to get to know Colchester a little bit. And one of the things I do to find my way around is I run. And I had to be running is one of my spiritual disciplines. Really good spiritual discipline is running. It really helps you. I meet with the Lord when I run. Well, I also keep fit. And I had to be careful though because I was going to go for a run today, but I thought, well, actually, if I go to High Woods, where I normally run, there are so many different exits that I can either take half an hour or an hour and 35 minutes. Depending on which turning I take. So best if I didn't do that. So instead of running, I rode in my garage so I knew I wouldn't get lost there. But there are a few other things that also confuse me as well. And one of those is your recycling system. I now have in my shed a set of 3 boxes, but that 3 boxes isn't enough. I then have another 3 inside our house as well. And not only do I have loads of different boxes, what I'm getting confused is that sometimes you have to put things in plastic bags, and sometimes some things you don't put in plastic bags. And then on top of that, I am the only one in my street who seems to have a black wheelie bin. I don't know if that's because I'm the vicar and I've got special privileges, or if it's because I'm new and I've got a wheelie bin. How are we doing with the slides? Are we getting there? Are we warming up? Well, we don't worry about them, Ruth. That's all good. We can manage without them. Don't worry. The other thing that I've been really confused about is your road system. Particularly, there is one roundabout that I've discovered that is so confusing. It's called the Magic Roundabout. There's a picture of it there, It is so confusing. And so I'm so worried about it. In fact, I've started avoiding that area of town altogether, even if I have to go around like the rest of Colchester to get to the other side of that roundabout. Now, we did have a film. Are we going to get the film clip, Ruth, or not?
The idea of the ring junction is to speed up the flow of traffic. The Transport and Road Research Laboratory, who've designed it, say it can improve things by as much as 30%. Throughout the passage through the roundabout, the rule is to give way to the traffic from the right. This means that turning right, as we're going to do, you have to give way twice. Turning left, you have to give way twice. And going ahead, you have to give way 3 times before you're through. Long vehicles, which will have to use this roundabout, are advised to treat it as a conventional roundabout and go right round the outside of all 4 mini roundabouts. So we come to the first checkpoint. Go ahead. Now he should give for me, this truck, which he has done so. We go across here and stop again. There's nothing coming from our right. Yes, there is. We'll hold on for this one. And then we'll go ahead. Now this lady here should give for me. She doesn't want to, but she has. And in all the times I've used this very difficult junction, I think that's about the easiest I've ever been through it.
I think it'll be quite good once we get used to it, you know. It's a bit frightening at first, but I think once everybody get used to where they should be and do what they should do, I think it'll be fine.
Do you think
The weekends will tell the tale, of course.
People coming in from outside, seeing it for the first time, it's most confusing.
It certainly is complicated, but we hope it's not too complicated.
It is so complicated. I am so confused. I had to Google, when I was Googling, I found that this clip from 1972. I thought you'd appreciate that piece of free information, just in case you too were confused and you needed a bit of clarity of how to get through that roundabout. That really, though, describes, doesn't it, sometimes what it's like being an apprentice of Jesus, a follower of Jesus. We get confused about what it may mean. We long for clarity, but we get confused when we see those stories or hear those stories of the great missionaries or the social reformers like William Wilberforce or Mother Teresa or Simon Gilbo, for anyone who knows Simon. A great friend of mine, or a good friend of mine, who's a missionary out in Burundi in Central Eastern Africa. A kind of guy you look at and go, oh, I wish I could be like that, wish I could be like that. Such faith. I remember him saying, I'll be dead by the time he's 40. He's still alive, but only by the grace of God. He's got some great stories. And if he was here, he'd kind of blow you away. But the reality is when we look at those kind of people, we can feel a little bit insecure, can't we? Because we think, we're not quite like that. I can't quite do that. But you know what the reality is? The reality is that when you talk to them, actually what you see in the kind of the public face, as it were, it is not the reality. Mother Teresa, for example, in her journals, if you ever read any of her journals, she wrote about how she struggled to hear God. But she decided to continue to press into God, even though she couldn't hear him. She said, actually, the time when I could hear the Lord most was when I was 17, when I had the first initial call. And I was, that's really interesting. Sometimes we ourselves, as if we put on a mask, we pretend that we're someone that we're not. Even, when we come to church, perhaps we feel we have to present ourselves in a certain way. We're afraid or ashamed of what people might think if they really knew what was going on. I wonder how you are tonight and what it is that you're struggling with. And what it means for you to be a follower of Jesus and how you're beginning to explore what that might look like. I'm trying to learn to play golf, and anyone else play golf here or played golf here? Am I yes. Yeah, well, it's a very frustrating sport, and I love it and I hate it. But I have, in golf, I have a coach, and the coach kind of teaches me, and I have to follow her to learn how to play. She will teach me how to grip the club, how to stand. It's very important how you stand, your stance, all that kind of stuff. It's really important I do as she tells me what. She tells us what to do, and it's really important that I mirror her, I copy her, I listen to her. I could choose, of course, to be totally free and do it my own way. And I could come up to the ball and go, ha, whack, and hope for the best. And I have tried that, believe me, and it never ends very well. And the irony is, in trying to be free, I end up actually just tying myself as not really frustrated, the ball going off in kind of 45 degrees in the wrong direction. Here's the point. I choose to submit myself to her so I can learn how to play. I do a load of practices and routines. I don't get to invent them myself. And actually that leads to far greater enjoyment of the game. By following the coach, actually I get to enjoy the game. And so it is when we follow Jesus. Actually, it may seem restrictive to follow his path, but actually in following his path, actually we have far greater freedom. Do you remember, those of you who were here last week, this quote from John Tyson? A disciple practices Jesus' way of ministry. A disciple imitates Jesus' life and character. A disciple finds and teaches others disciples for Jesus. You know, sometimes we hear that word discipleship and we just think, oh gosh, that's really hard work. That sounds really tough. But actually, if you read the Gospels, if you read Luke, for example, what do we see in Luke? Jesus is always on the way to a meal, or coming from a meal, going to another meal. That is the entirety of Luke's Gospel. Eating. Eating. See, it occurs to me that following Jesus would have been such fun. It would have been, but actually it was based around just living your life with him. Normal people. Do you notice how he eats with everyone? Because when you eat, doesn't that create the context of just being normal friends? So for me, here at St. John's, how we create a culture of welcome for everyone, where everyone is welcome, where we have food and fellowship right in the middle. We do that not because we feel we should, but because we want to grow in love of one another and actually share our lives with one another. That's what we do as a community. That's why as a staff team, when we gather as a staff team, we eat each week. We start off with food together. That's why Jackie and I, when we want to get to know you, we want to invite you around to our house. We're not doing that because that's the right thing to do. We're doing that because we want to build friendships with you so that we can truly journey with one another, so that we truly are weeping with one another, laughing with one another, cheering each other on. You know, we often have periods of struggle and strife and difficulty. But actually, when we walk with one another, then actually, and share our lives with one another, we are able to face each of those difficulties one by one. And it's not like hard work. It's actually really good fun as well. And Peter is a real example of someone who actually lived on the edge of life. Didn't he? Didn't we love Peter? He was the one who would jump out of the boat and try and go over to Jesus and then think of the consequences a bit later on. He would always be the one saying, yeah, here I am, choose me. He'd always be the one who would shout his mouth off. He was impetuous. He was angry. He'd be all in one moment, and then the next moment he might back off. Peter, do you know, if you lay out his story, actually it seems like he kept going back to fishing. It wasn't like just the first call, and maybe if you read that in Luke chapter 5, for example, where, famously, Jesus said, come and follow me. And Peter left his nets, do you remember that? And went, those of you who know that, and followed him. Actually, it seems like he kept going back to fishing. It's what he knew. It was his safe place. And so when he started getting confused, he went back to fishing. See, as we read that story tonight, did you go, I recognize some of this story of fishing, of throwing a net over to the other side and catching fish. And as if at that point, the penny has dropped for Peter. And he almost dives into the water to meet with Jesus, where he is at the fire, making a meal. An encounter around food yet again. A place where the Lord can do business and so that he can be transformed. A place of encounter, a place of memories, a catch of fish, a beach, a calling, a fire. What is Jesus doing here, I wonder? What is he up to? Why this place, this time? See, I wonder if what Jesus is doing is taking Peter back to the place of his greatest failure. The place of denial. The place where around the fire, you can read it in John 18, where Simon Peter was warming himself by a fire. And the challenge came. You aren't one of the disciples too, are you? And he denied it, saying, I am not. What is Jesus doing? Reminding Peter of that time. What is he doing? The passage says, when they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said. You know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my lambs. And then again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said, take care of my sheep. And Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time, do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. You know, it might be that you have heard talks around this passage before, and people can draw out the meaning of the words of love here. There's different Greek words that are used, agape and phileo. But actually, this is, I think, a style of John's writing. He likes to bring different concepts of love together, or he had here sheep and lambs, and you'll see that through John's writing. Actually, he's a great kind of poet, and he draws images and pictures for us. And I think if we get so caught up in those little micro details that we miss what Jesus is actually doing. See, what Jesus is doing is he's not being cruel to remind Peter of what he's done wrong, but rather he's taking to a point of encounter, so that the point of deepest failure that does not define him for the rest of his life. How many of us can point to an area of sin in our life, or a time when we have let God down and we know it, and it comes to define us far more than actually what that sin was in the first place. We've been forgiven for it, by the way, when we come to him, but it still defines us. And what Jesus is doing is taking Peter back 3 times. That is why he asks him 3 times. Because Peter has to deal with that pain. He has to face up to the failure. We are great at pain avoidance, aren't we? We don't like it. We do everything in our power to avoid the pain. And what we often do is we take those things that have hurt us or in pain, and we put them in a box, and we close the lid, and we put it down into the basement, as it were, and we pretend it's not there. But you know what the thing is? We can't keep the basement locked, because those things will have a habit of leaking out and affecting us. They will come to define us. The pain will come to define us, not the grace of the Lord Jesus. Because what Jesus knows, that if he's going to go on and be the person that God is calling him to be, he needs to encounter Jesus afresh. There's so much that we could dig out of this. I just want to say to you, if there is an area in your life that you need to deal with tonight, come and meet with the Lord Jesus tonight. When you take communion in a bit, that could be the first sign of actually receiving healing from the Lord. Use it as that time. We'd love to pray with you. But it may be you need more than that. It may be that you need prayer counseling. And that's good, by the way. That's good. I have a spiritual director who I meet with who talks me through stuff all the time and makes sure I don't get stuck in the past. So, what does it mean for us to move from confusion to clarity? See, here at St. John's, we use this analogy to help us up, in, and out. It helps us to understand more of what it means to follow Jesus in the everyday stuff of life. And on this sermon, in this passage, you will see aspects of this. Do you notice how Peter was taken up the beach privately by Jesus? He didn't, by the way, do this publicly. He met him in the private place, in the one-to-one. Peter was having a one-to-one with Jesus. And what Jesus says is that so we too can have a one-to-one with the Father. Anyone here do Lepto 365 or have the Lepto 365 app? Really recommend it to you. It's how I start my day every day. And on Thursday, I was really struck by this reminder of Jesus' teaching on the Sermon on the Mount. And it says this, "And when you pray, you must not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and at street corners, that they may be seen by others. Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees what you do in secret will reward you." And I love John White's reflection on this passage. He says this, "I find it fascinating that Jesus' first words on prayer begin not with what to pray, but where to pray. A secret place." Jesus' life was marked by a rhythm of retreat and return from the secret place to the public place, like the ebb and flow of the tide. Breathing in and breathing out. Jesus would retreat often to secluded and lonely places away from the pressures, the noise, the crowd, to a place free from distraction. At the heart of this commitment is to a pattern of prayer, and the secret place to that rhythm is not about religion, but about revelation. And you may ask, what is the reward? The reward is God himself. The revelation of the Father in a fatherless world. Being known and being loved and being seen by the Father in a secret place is perhaps the greatest gift of healing I can turn to and offer to others. Where is your secret place? I have a chair that I sit in every day in my office. I sit in the same place and I have my cup of tea. I go there each time. It's like a routine that helps me. But what is that for you? Maybe it's a bench that you sit in. Maybe it's a place in a park. Maybe it's somewhere you can go to, somewhere where you can be alone. John Wesley's wife used to each day get her apron strings and throw it over her head. That was her secret place. So, do not starve yourself of the presence of Jesus, because this is what gives us the food to get through life and love it. But it's not just about doing it by ourselves. It is about being in community. You see, Jesus went up the mountainside to pray, and he came down to be part of a community. You see, Christianity is not a faith that can be sustained by ourselves broadly. It is always about being in communion with others. Jesus went from table to table. The church is the bride of Christ because we are called to be in community together. Do you notice? You might not have noticed because we didn't read it out, so it's a bit unfair to say, did you notice? But just before this passage, Peter basically said, well, he didn't quite say this, but he said, I'm not in a great place, guys. I'm not feeling too good. Don't really know what's going on, so I'm going to go off fishing. And what it does say is, his mates say this, oh, we'll go with you. We'll go with you. Because they were his mates. And they knew it wasn't good for Peter to be by himself at that moment in time. He needed people just to be with him. Just to sit alongside him. You know, sometimes we worry about what we have to say when people are going through tough times, but sometimes we just have to sit with them, be with them, go fishing with them, as his mates did. We will go with you. Who is journeying with you? You see, Sundays are really important, aren't they? I observe that for many, sometimes we went regularly, every week. But now, we just come occasionally. It's just one leisure activity among others. But the thing is, if we don't build up our community, then when we go through our tough times, we won't have those people to say, I'll go fishing with you. And it's not just about the Sundays either, because Sundays are wonderful, but that's like the celebration. Actually, we need to be in community with one another. And at St. John's, we have communities, as Kristen said right at the beginning. And we long for everyone to be in a community, and we want to work out how we do that. And we know we've got a bit of a way to go to work out how it works with everyone in everyone's different time of life. But we're going to be doing that over this next 6 months or so everyone can be in a community. That's what we long for, a place where we can build friendships, share life with each other, and have fun together, and weep with those who weep, cry with those who cry, laugh with those who laugh. And finally, the out bit. We haven't got time to go into that now. But you see, Jesus didn't just sit there with Peter and say, okay, I'm going to look after you, don't worry about it. He said, right, you need to encounter me so that you can go. You encounter so you go. So that you can go and feed my sheep. You can go and care for my lambs. See, that is what it's about. It's about working out what that looks like for each of us. It's not about going overseas. It might be for one or two of us, but really it's actually about where God calls you, about to your friends and to your family, to your doorstep. Jesus, interestingly, already had fish. He didn't need the disciples' fish, but he invites them to go and fishing so that they could be part of the journey. And he can invite them into what he was already doing. He invites us, by the way, into what he's already doing. He's already out there. He just says, come with me. Have the courage to be drawn back to God. If you've been wandering away, have the courage to come back. And you may look out there at the world in despair and wonder where God is. But what if? What if it's all this struggle? Mark Sayers, I love Mark Sayers. Listen to some of his blogs and some of his podcasts. Amazing guy. Brain the size of a planet. He says this: what if God is allowing some of this fracturedness that we see around the world to continue to push the church back into a dependency on him, a dependency upon him, not into techniques, not into procedures that will protect us from pain. See, it's not about cleverness. It's about dependency on Jesus, dependency upon him. That is what I'm calling you to seek Jesus afresh. Look for him. See, Jesus on the beach confronted Peter with his issues, with gentleness, with love, but with firmness. And that led him to lead the most exciting of lives. It didn't end well for Peter, if we look on it with human eyes, but he loved it. He loved it. He loved being on fire for Jesus, have confidence. You know what? After this moment, he never went back to fishing because he had the opportunity to live his best life. Live his best life for Jesus. To be fully fulfilled in all that he was. Next week, I'm not going to speak for so long. Promise everyone. I'm going to give you the invitation to have more time to respond. I want to leave you with a single question. If Jesus was inviting you to sit by the fire with him this evening for breakfast, late breakfast, what would he say to you? Where do you need his transformation? What is it in your life that you need to put right this evening? Shall we pray?